Jay. Ano? Game? Okay, I have 3 items for today. I will go to the more exciting items first. First, in the matter of GR number 227635, Laila de Lima versus Rodrigo Roa Duterte in his capacity as President of the Philippines. The court resolved as follows, quote, without necessarily giving due course to the petition, the petitioner and the Office of the Solicitor General are directed to submit their respective memorandum on the issue of whether the President of the Republic of the Philippines, as the sole respondent in this case, is immune from suit, including this one, within a non-extendable period of 10 days from notice. It is noted that the issue of immunity of the President from suit is a He, her son Alvarez et al. Versus Executive Secretary Salvador C. Medaldea et al. GR number 226117, Zaira Patricia B. Banyaga et al. Versus Secretary of National Defense et al. GR number 226120, Algamar A. Latif versus Secretary Delphine Lorenzana et al. And GR number 226294, Senator Laila N. de Lima versus Executive Secretary Salvador C. Medaldea et al. The court, with a vote of 9-5, with Justice Bienvenido Reyes taking no part, rendered the following judgment. Wherefore, premises considered, the petitions are dismissed. Necessarily, the status quo ante order is hereby lifted. Close quote. The following concurred in the decision, Justices Velasco, Leonardo de Castro, Brion, Bersamin, Del Castillo, Perez, Mendoza, and Perlas Bernabe. The following dissented from the decision: the Chief Justice, the Senior Associate Justice, Justices Leonen, Hardeleza, and Kagiwa. The following submitted separate opinions: concurring opinions, Justices Brion, Perez, and Mendoza. Dissenting opinions, the Chief Justice, the Senior Associate Justice, Justices Leonen and Kagiwa. As of today, 1 or 2 more justices may still submit their separate opinions when the decision is finally released. Under the internal rules, the decision, together with all of the dissenting and concurring opinions, will be released at the same time. They will not be released today because, as you know, the decision will end. The separate opinions will still be edited, rewritten, and finalized and signed. So expect that within the week. Okay? There is a long summary, about 8 pages, I will not read it, of the decision as well as the dissenting opinions. You may ask questions and I can just pick up from the decision. It's too long to read. Wait, isa lang. Oponente, Justice Peralta. Yes. Ha? Dali Okay, 1 to 5. First 5 siguro. Okay. First, no grave abuse of discretion on the part of the President in ordering the burial of the remains of the former President at the Libingan ng mga Bayani, because this was done in the exercise of his mandate under Article 7, Section 17, the faithful compliance of the Laws Clause of the 1987 Constitution, and that there is no law that prohibits the burial of the Marcos remains at the Libingan ng mga Bayani. Second main reason, the President has the power to reserve under the administrative code for public use and for specific public purposes any of the lands of the public domain, and that the reserved land shall remain subject to the specific public purpose indicated until otherwise provided by law or proclamation. Court found that there is no law or executive issuance at present that specifically excludes the land on which the LNMB is located from the use it was originally intended by the previous presidents. Third reason, the court found that under pertinent AFP regulations, particularly Regulation G161-375, the Marcos remains could be interred at LLMB because Marcos possessed the qualifications and none of the disqualifications under the resolutions, pointing out that he was a former president, he was a former commander-in-chief, he was a former soldier, Medal of Valor awardee, former legislator, Secretary of National Defense. The court also disagreed with the position articulated by some justices as well as the petitioners that the former president had been dishonorably discharged, saying that this specific disqualification pertains only to the military covered under the Articles of War, and specifically those in the active service. And finally, the court disagreed that Marcos was disqualified because he had not been convicted of crimes involving moral turpitude. The court said that the cases cited by the petitioners, which were cases abroad, were all civil in nature, and therefore he has not been convicted by any final judgment involving moral turpitude. That's the long and short of it. You can read it in the summary. There is also a summary of the concurring opinions thus far, as well as the dissenting opinions thus far. Please note in your reports that one or two more justices may still submit their separate opinions. I don't know whether they are concurring or dissenting. I don't know which justices will still submit. Huh? Let's see. I think because of the main opinion disagreeing with the dissent, you can see already some of the issues. Public purpose, public funds, dishonorable discharge, reading the Constitution as a whole, grave abuse of discretion by the President because there is no public purpose for the interment of the remains of the Libingan Bayani. One particular justice pointed out as well that it appears that the actions of the public respondents are contrary to the oath of office because they encourage impunity, which is the result of rewarding the person who presided over human rights violations and who personally participated in the plunder of the public treasury. One justice also mentioned that the court had already made a ruling on who Mr. Marcos was, and the Congress had also made a ruling, well, determination rather, of who Mr. Marcos was, and that these could not be changed. These were not anymore subject of review, whether judicial or administrative. That's a very quick snapshot. I am sorry I cannot read everything. They are very long. 8-page? I think you will get yours as soon as you step out that door. Isa lang. Okay, come on. The what? Sorry.
So what kind of honors would be afforded to the
No, they were simply talking about grave abuse of discretion. So I don't think there is any question of fact involved here. This is the Supreme Court, so the Supreme Court does not look at questions of fact. It just looks at questions of law, particularly in this case, grave abuse of discretion. Anjo.
Sir, is the decision of any immediate executory or executory?
I read the entire judgment, so it doesn't say anything about being immediately executory.
But since then, you have not been lifted, the former dictator can be there tomorrow.
I read the entire judgment, Dina, so wag mo na lang ako pasagutin na yan. Ha? Excuse me? Bienvenido Reyes, yes. Okay? Ano Leah? Isa. Leah. Ha? Hindi pa alam. Kakatapos lang nila eh. So the court just asked that I think they will constitute someone to, they will not constitute, they will direct someone to investigate the issuance of the search warrant. I don't know the parameters yet of the investigation. Huh? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. But that's within the power of the court anyway, because it's a lower court that issued the search warrant. Yes? Question? Okay na? Anong gusto niyong gawin ko? Ano? Ano itataas ko? Naka-folder. Naka-folder. Ano itataas ko? Naka-folder siya. Okay? Ay, salamat. Ha? Kayo talaga. Ayan. Sige, susunod may bayad na. Okay? Thank you.
On history, no? Yung mga rason na nabasa ng ating Supreme Court spokesperson basically pointed to the fact na walang specific law, may mga technicalities kaya pwedeng ilibing si former President Marcos sa libingan ng Bayani. But I think the petitioners and a lot of us wanted them to look at history and not just technicalities. No? Ano bang ibig sabihin to sa ating kasaysayan kung ililibing si former President Marcos na isang diktador at napakaraming abuses na nangyari sa panahon niya na ililibing sa libingan ng Bayani. So, iniisip mo yung nakaraan, which of course are the martial law victims, at yung bukas, which are a lot of the young people who in their lifetime makikita na nailibing ang isang diktador sa libingan ng Bayani. So, I think I'm quite disappointed with the Supreme Court decision. And you're left scratching your head, no? Kung bakit ganito yung nangyari.
Sir, what does that make us? So, anong nangyayari sa itsura ng bansa natin?
Well, again, no, a lot of the petitioners, kasama na rin tayo, wanted them to appreciate the case at the level of history, not just technicalities. Kasi yung technicality na hindi naman siya na-convict, nasa mga batas na naman natin na napakaraming abuso nung panahong yon, napakaraming biktima. We have laws that actually are trying to give reparations to martial law victims. Di pa ba sapat yun? So, it's really disappointing and that they decided that way. But at the end of the day, ang kasaysayan na lang yung manghuhusga sa atin.
Sir, how will
In his 70s, with ruddy cheeks and an easy laugh. He was arrested with no charges filed in 1978 and put under solitary confinement for 2 years. He was viciously beaten, had boiling water poured at him, and was hung from the ceiling by his handcuffed hands. In his own words, he said, "I was held on either arm by 2 men, and the 3rd man sat on my lap. The blindfold was removed and replaced by a towel on my face. They commenced to put water over the towel on my face. I had a sensation of drowning." Mr. President, this is what was known as waterboarding, an innocuous name for a torture technique so repulsive and dehumanizing. I rise on behalf of Eta Rosales, former Congresswoman and former Chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, who was repeatedly raped and tortured during martial law. She recounts her torture under the hands of her prison guards. They tried to make me speak by burning me, pouring what felt like hot wax from a burning candle on my arms and legs. When that didn't work, they tore off my clothes, pressed the barrel of a gun against my temple, and played Russian roulette. When she was elected Congresswoman of Akbayan in 1998, Mr. President, she met one of her captors who had now become her colleague. The last time I met you, Etta said, with her trademark candor, was in the military safe house where I was tortured. I rise for them, Mr. President, and I rise for all the victims of martial law. Ako po'y tumatayo sa harap ninyo ngayon, alang-alang sa mga na-torture, mga pinatay, mga kinulong ng Rehimeng Marcos. Ako'y tumatayo alang-alang sa kanilang mga mahal sa buhay, mga magulang, asawa, at anak na inulila ng diktadura. Para po sa kanila ang resolusyon na ihahain ko sa Senado ngayong hapon. I rise to tell them, during this winter of anxiety and uncertainty, that there are many of us who still remember. I want to tell them that there are mothers like myself who tell their outspoken millennials that their freedoms in social media did not come for free, and that their counterparts in the 1970s were being thrown in prison for speaking their mind. Gusto kong ikwento sa kanila yung mga guro sa mga paaralan kung saan ako nag-donate ng librong Never Again ni Raisa Robles na nagsasabing sa sarili nilang kusa at pagpupunyagi, binabahagi nila ang kahindik-hindik na mga pangyayari sa panahon ng diktadura sa kanilang mga estudyante. I want to tell them about the many young people I have met, so far removed from the stereotype of the uncaring, self-absorbed millennial, who ask me what they can do to fight the forces of historical revisionism that are at work, and who assure me that the struggle to preserve our collective memory is a struggle their generation shares with ours. Hindi ko po panghihimasukan ang pasya ng Korte Suprema hinggil sa paglibing ng dating diktador sa libingan ng mga bayani. We cannot second-guess its wisdom, even as we cannot imagine how it must be for Sixto Carlos, Eta Rosales, and the Quimpo family, who will live with the reality that the architect of their torture and the torture and death of their kin has now been designated a hero. Habang tinuturo natin sa ating mga kabataan ang karahasan ng martial law dahil yun ang nakalagay sa Republic Act No. 10368, ililibing naman daw natin sa libingan ng mga bayani ang siyang naghasik ng karahasan na ito. Habang tayo nagbabayad ng danyos sa mga biktima ng martial law at sa kanilang mga pamilya, ililibing natin daw sa libingan ng mga bayani ang dahilan ng pagbayad ng danyos. But we also know that the decision to give the late dictator a hero's burial lies ultimately in the hands of President Rodrigo Duterte. I call on the President to respond to the challenge of history and reject with finality all plans to give Marcos a hero's burial. The libingan ng mga bayani is the designated place for Filipino soldiers, war veterans, and citizens whose contributions to the nation render them fit to be called heroes. Given the long history of the Filipino people with tyranny and oppression, the libingan has been created to honor the memory of our brave countrymen and women who fought for freedom and liberty even in the face of superior force, so that the present generation may remember and emulate their legacy. It should be the final resting place of heroes, a symbolism that is not lost on the Marcos family, who has been lobbying feverishly for his burial, and, if our president is correct, even funded his campaign to secure this concession. Mr. President, in Germany, Adolf Hitler's initial grave is now a car park in Berlin. Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator notorious for maintaining torture chambers in Kampala, is not even buried in his own country. In Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic's party pushed heavily for his burial in the Alley of the Greats, but was rebuffed. He is now buried in his hometown. In Haiti, Francois Papadoc Duvalier, who brought Haiti to economic ruin, used voodoo legends to control his people, and executed his political opponents, was denied a state funeral after his death. His grave in Port-au-Prince is now in shambles. Pol Pot, known as the Butcher of Cambodia, was unceremoniously burned in a pile of rubbish. His cremation site in Ang Long Veng is now a tourist destination, and many Cambodians travel to the site to spit on him. Muammar Gaddafi's body, after being displayed for 5 days by the new leaders of Libya, was laid to rest in a simple, unmarked grave. Ganito po tinatrato ang mga diktador sa ibang bansa, Mr. President. Ang kanilang puntod ay hindi puntod ng parangal. Kung ito man ay bibigyan ng pansin, ito ay para magturo ng leksyon sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Ito ay para sabihin, huwag tularan. Habang dito sa Pilipinas, ang mga diktador ay tinuturing bang bayani at binibigyan ng parangal, at ang biktima ng diktador ay pinagdududahan at isinasa isang tabi. But, Mr. President, it is not only for the victims of martial law that I rise, for the generation of our parents, and for our generation who has lived with the enduring wounds of martial law. I also rise for our younger generations, those who will only get to listen to the stories of our wounds, and who we hope will see in those stories our deepest truths. I rise for our millennials, who will probably never meet Susan and her siblings, or June Carlos, or Eta Rosales, but who we hope will realize that the heroes of martial law, many of them were young persons like themselves. Ang nagpabagsak sa diktadura ay katulad lang din nila. Katulad din ng aking mga anak. Masayahin, palabarkada, palatawa, may pangarap sa buhay. Ngunit tumalima noong hinamon ng kasaysayan. Mr. President, nagpasya na ang Korte Suprema, but no tombstone, no grandiose cemetery can change the fact that Ferdinand Marcos was not a hero. He was a plunderer, torturer, and a thief, with a family now seeking to rewrite history to serve their interests. He co-opted institutions, in the past this Senate included, in order to consolidate all power to himself. It is our duty as senators, Mr. President, as Filipinos, as students of history, to stand against this travesty and say, as has been said before, never again. Only then can we look back to the past with pride and to the future with hope. Let us not fail the test of history. Mr. President, as I have previously discussed with the Majority Floor Leader and with the permission of the body, I would like to have this privileged speech considered as sponsorship speech for Senate Resolution number 86, and kindly request the Majority Floor Leader to subject it to a vote. Marami pong salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Tiveros. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I move for a suspension?
Session is suspended.
Kaya ako tumuo dito, naimbita ako dito, nakikisa ako sa yung sinasaayon ako yung pananaw nila. No? Pangalaga, Libingan ng Bayani. No? Dapat ito parang binibigyan ng mga natatanging Pilipino ng sambayanan ng honor. At saka yun ako sa mga nandito na hindi dapat na mailibing si Ginoong Marcos. Kung kalimutan natin yung pinagdaanan natin, merong isang matalinong manunulat na nagsabi, si George Santayana, those who forget the mistakes of the past are condemned to repeat them. Pag nakalimutan natin pagkakamali na lumipas, hindi baka maulit. Garantisado maulit lahat to.